wood is swelling in the damp. The letter rests beneath a book. The blue ink fading into slate, the paper thinning at the fold. You wrote of standing on the edge, of leaving nothing to the earth. Your slanted letters lean so far, they almost tumble off the page. Such heavy, anxious promises to never let the fever pass, to never lead a quiet life, to freeze the blood inside the vein. It takes a long time to come down. From such a loud and breathless height, I trace the loop of how you sign, a stranger with my very hands, who swore to never age a day, who fought the turning of the sun. I watched the dust land on the desk. The afternoon is pale and slow. The kettle rests upon the stove. The window shows a silent street. I fold the frantic child away into the dark where they belong. The house is warm enough for me. The quiet suits the winter bone. A heavy coat, the morning frost, the ticking clock, the fading mark. The dirt road turns to dust. Deep inside the ancient wood, no sign to guide the way. I walk the hidden path, a sudden flash of white, striking on a ruined wall, an altar built of stone, an altar built of stone, waiting for the storm to break. The sun cuts through the void, the ancient pillars rise. Cover up your heavy face, the world is turning cold. The world is turning cold. The roots are pulling down, splitting through the marble floor. An iron gate remains, standing in the bitter rain. I feel the crushing weight pressing on my human skull, a monument of greed washed by centuries of storm. The sun cuts through the void, the ancient pillars rise. Cover up your heavy face, the world is turning cold. The world is turning carved commands written for the final war. The silence fills my head, tolling bell. I leave the ruined shrine, running from the blinding sun, avoiding every open door. The stones will outlive man, the stones will outlive man. Hear the breaking of the earth, the stones will outlive man, the stones will outlive man.
Dust upon the biscuit tin, lid is dented, painted blue. Found you near the bottom edge, laughing by the garden wall. Sunlight caught your unkempt hair. Jumper tied around your waist, half a pint left in your hand. Time just halted at your feet. We stay forever young in here, while the heavy clouds roll past. Paper edges turning soft, I am slower down the stairs, but your gaze is perfect still, frozen right at 3:30. Seasons turn the grass to mud, winter strips the willow bare. You remain in short sleeves now, smiling at the plastic lens. We stay forever young in here, into the street. Leave you in the silent dark, never growled at all. Outside there is rain again. Put the kettle on to boil, I will watch the weather break, knowing you are safe within. Just a fleeting summer day, kept away from ticking clocks. Always 20 in the sun, forever young against the brick.
I bought a handful of rockets down the road. I stood outside your flat in the pouring cold. I stood outside your flat in the pouring cold. I struck a match against the soaking stone. I struck the match to try and bring you home. The water hits my face and runs straight down. I watch the colors, try not to drown. I am setting fire to the rain tonight. I am throwing sparks into the black. Watch them burn a hole up in the sky. I watch them die before they make it back. Ooh, they die before they make it back. I held the sparkler tight inside my hand. I held it burning while the heavy weather ran. The pavement washed away the red and blue. The pavement washed away the last of you. The water hits my face and runs straight down. I watch the colors, try not to drown. I am setting fire to the rain tonight. I am throwing sparks into the black. Watch them burn a hole up in the sky. I watch them die before they make it back. Ooh, they die before they make it back. You cannot warm a house that's made of ice. You cannot stop the flood with just a spark. But I will stand out here and pay the price. I will burn my fingers in the dark. Yes, I will burn my fingers in the dark. I am setting fire to the rain tonight. I am throwing sparks to the rain tonight. I am throwing sparks into. I watch them die before they make it back. I strike the match, I strike the stone. I strike the match, I'm going home.
We parked outside your apartment building. The motor ticks as it settles into the cold. We haven't spoken since we left the highway. You look toward the pavement, covered in wet leaves. You look toward the pavement, covered in wet leaves. My jacket is damp from the walk across the lot. The atmosphere pulls me toward your center. I can feel the current leaping off your skin before your fingers even brush my shoulder. The magnitude of this gravity brings me to my knees. This is what it means to surrender completely. Conversation was a polite language, a sensible conversation over a dinner table. But looking at the constellation of freckles on your wrist, I realize every map I treckles on your wrist. I realize every map I trusted was drawn poorly. The compass needle spins out of control. The atmosphere pulls me towards your center. I can feel the current leaping off your skin before your fingers even brush my shoulder. The magnitude of this gravity brings me to my knees. This is what it means to surrender completely. I am giving up the armor I carried for years. I am letting the silence break into a roar. I am discarding every cynical joke I used to tell. I am terrified of how effortless this feels. The atmosphere pulls me toward your center. I can feel the current leaping off your skin. The magnitude of this gravity brings me to my knees. This is what it means to surrender completely. The neighborhood finally goes quiet. You turn and reach across the space. I brace for the impact of your handfall.
I took down the map we bought in July, the one where we drew lines across the coast. We never packed the car or left the driveway. We just sat at the wooden table making toast to all the grand escapes we'd take tomorrow. It was a lovely way to pass the season, believing we were bound for somewhere new. I loved the vision of the life we drew, even if the ink was never true. But the daylight breaks and clears the heavy air, and I have to walk away from what was never there. I found the keys to that old rusted Chevy, the one you swore you'd fix before the fall. The leaves are piling up against the tires now, and I don't hear the engine turn at all. I am putting on my coat and stepping out. It was a lovely way to pass the season, believing we were bound for somewhere new. I love the vision of the life we drew, even if the ink was never true. But the daylight breaks and clears the heavy air, and I have to walk away from what was never there. You cannot live inside a promise forever. The firewood runs out and the winter gets cold. I kept the letter you wrote in my pocket, but the paper is tearing and starting to fold. I need to feel the gravel under my feet. It was a lovely way to pass the season, believing we were bound for somewhere new. I love the vision of the life we drew, even if the ink was never true. But the daylight breaks and clears the heavy air, and I have to walk away from what was never there. The table is clear now. The driveway is quiet. I am letting go of the beautiful fiction. Goodbye to the beautiful thing we made up. Goodbye to the beautiful thing.
Stone in the square is still. The stone in the square is still. We are the passing birds. We are the passing birds. Flesh is the autumn, bronze is forever. We walk on the paving, we walk on the paving. Time is the rushings, time is the rushings, time is the rushing flames. Youth is an open hand, the statue remains, the statue remains. Grant us the unaging breath, grant us the unaging breath, grant us the unaging breath. Make us the monument, make us the monument. Flesh is the autumn, bronze is forever. Time is the rushing flames. Youth is an open hand, the statue remains, the statue remains. Grant us the unaging breath, grant us the unaging breath. Make us the monument, make us the monument. The stone in the square is still, the stone in the square is still. We asked for the endless spring, we asked for the endless spring, the endless spring forever. The sun falls behind the ridge, the sky turns heavy. I watch the temperature drop on the dashboard, driving away from the house we built. It's just red rock now. The sand cools down out here. The heat leaves the stone. There's no safe place left to go. The heat leaves the stone. The sand cools down out here. There's no safe place left to go. I thought we had a harbor somewhere out past the pines, but the land shifted while we weren't looking, and the water dried up. I keep the windows down, just feeling the air change. The sand cools down out here. The heat leaves the stone. There's no safe place left to go. The heat leaves the stone. The sand cools down out here. There's no safe place left to go. Just a straight line now, just the tires on the asphalt, just the tires on the asphalt. The heat leaves hauled the heavy stones from the riverbed, built a fortress out of oak and dread. You said the walls would keep the winter out, but the damp crept up through the floorboards, and the cold settled in my mouth. I saw the spark catch the dry wood of the frame, watched you pour your anger on the flame. The heat was a shock against the frost. I didn't try to fetch the water from the well. I just stood and measured the cost, and the rafters broke in a cloud of grey smoke. The heavy roof fell to the dust, and for the first time in years, and for the first time in years, past the ruin and the rust, the sky was so wide, the stars were a map I could trust, a map I could trust. You shouted something about what we had lost, kicking at the embers with your boot. But I felt the rain on my face, washing the suit from my skin. I was breathing the open space when the rafters broke in a cloud of grey smoke. The heavy roof fell to the dust, and for the first time in years, and for the first time in years, past the ruin and the rust, the sky was so wide, the stars were a map I could trust, a map I could trust. I'm leaving the stones where they lie, the ashes blow a night to navigate. Kept the wool jumper you put over my shoulders back when the gale was tearing up the coast. We pulled the damp canvas from the water to the shingle and made a quiet room out of the ghost. You stopped the freezing drought from getting to my bones, but sleeping in the wreckage takes a toll. You were the harbor and you were the flood, the quiet morning and the rising mud. I love the shelter of our makeshift walls, but they are only stitched from torn up sails. Every time the fabric snaps, I feel the timber break. I have to leave the sanctuary we made. The sky is clearing up above the channel now, the pavement's drying by the arcade doors. I watch you pulling on the ropes to keep us hidden, pacing the length of our uneven floors. You kept me breathing when the water pulled me down, but I can't build my future in a drowned out town. You were the harbor and you were the flood, the quiet morning and the rising mud. I love the shelter of our makeshift walls, but they are only stitched from torn up sails. Every time the fabric snaps, I feel the timber break. I have to leave the sanctuary we made. I am stepping out into the open air, leaving the damp and the heavy weather behind. It feels too quiet without the thunder of your voice, but I need a flat horizon for my mind. I will drop the anchor and I'll walk inland. 'Cause you were the harbor and you were the flood, the quiet morning and the rising mud. I love the shelter of our makeshift walls, but they are only stitched from torn up sails. Every time the fabric snaps, I feel the timber break. I have to leave the sanctuary we made. letting the canvas fall. Thank you for the shelter. Slatted teak, 80 degrees. You stood fast, turned left, walked. I pressed my palm flat on the board. The temperature drops 10 degrees in 30 seconds. Thermal loss, a perfect metric for goodbye. Brass hinge, the snap of your briefcase shut. A percussive period on the afternoon. We spoke in sharp, clipped fractions, half truth, quarter smiles. Now my hand reads the remaining warmth. A forensic sweep of what we were, fading fast. Calculate the exact moment of division. The wind slices right through my coat. We lack the friction to stability. Two parallel lines that brush by mistake, never meant to intersect twice. The wood goes cold. I pull my hand back, stand up, walk right. A textbook case of thermal transfer complete. We fit the old dry category now. Catalog stamped yesterday lovers, leaving zero trace on the painted pine. Zero trace, cold pine.